You stand in front of the mirror, not to fix your hair, not to check your outfit, but to look and see yourself. Yet the reflection staring back isn't entirely yours. It feels hollow, foreign. It watches you with a quiet contempt, as if waiting for you to realize something you've long ignored. I dare you to recall the last time you truly respected yourself. Not when you earned praise, not when you achieved something impressive, not when someone told you they were proud of you, but when you and you alone looked at yourself and felt a quiet, unshakable sense of worth, one not dependent on anyone's validation. Before we go any further, ask yourself this: what would your life look like if you finally respected yourself first? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you might just see yourself differently. Yeah, it makes you think and rethink, because whether we realize it or not, most of us have been conditioned to seek approval like a drug. Every decision, every opinion carefully shaped to avoid rejection, to attract applause, to belong. We've traded personal sovereignty for public validation, and we've done it so gradually that we didn't notice the exchange. From a young age, we're taught to please, to conform, to win the affection of parents, teachers, peers, bosses, followers. Subtly, society molds us into versions of ourselves that can be admired, envied, or desired, but rarely respected. There's a disturbing kind of emptiness that follows those who outsource their self-worth. You can feel it in moments of silence, in the quiet hours after applause fades, in the way compliments feel like air, weightless, fleeting, leaving no real substance behind. And it's in those moments, facing yourself in the mirror, that the quiet truth settles in. You've built a life around being liked, but never demanded respect. Not from others and not from yourself. This isn't a motivational cliche. It's a psychological trap, one Nietzsche warned about over a century ago. Because when you hand your worth to the crowd, you hand them the power to destroy you. And the unsettling reality is, people don't truly respect those who need their validation. Because if you don't respect yourself, no one else ever will. You live in a prison. Not one with walls or guards, but a far more sophisticated kind. A quiet, invisible cage built from expectations, unspoken rules, and desperate cravings for approval. And like most prisoners, you didn't even realize the door was locked until you tried to walk through it. From the moment you could speak, you were taught to seek permission, permission to be accepted, permission to feel valuable, permission to matter, approval from parents, validation from teachers, acceptance from friends, applause from strangers. It's a system so deeply woven into the fabric of your life that you've come to mistake it for freedom. But it wasn't always this way. In ancient times, worth wasn't something handed down by a crowd. It wasn't measured in currency or status or public opinion. It was earned through courage, loyalty, integrity, survival. A person's value was rooted in their relationship with themselves, in their ability to face hardship, keep their word, and die with honor if necessary. Respect wasn't requested, it was claimed. And then society changed. Nietzsche called it herd morality, a slow, corrosive force where individuals abandon their own instincts and principles for the safety of conformity. A morality born not from strength, but from fear. The fear of standing alone, of being different, of carrying one's own burden of meaning. In the modern world, it's no longer the tribe's approval you chase. It's likes, followers, job titles, relationships built on convenience, not authenticity. The illusion of being respected without the burden of earning it. We curate ourselves, branding our identities to fit whichever mask earns the most applause that week. But here's what no one tells you. The more you rely on external validation, the more fragile you become. Each compliment feels good for a moment, but it's gone before you can hold on to it. And every time someone disapproves, you shrink a little, hesitate a little, compromise a little, until one day you've built a life that isn't yours. Your opinions, your style, your ambitions, shaped not by desire, but by what you hope others will accept. And it eats at you, slowly eroding your confidence in ways you barely notice. You laugh at jokes you hate. You nod when you disagree. You tolerate disrespect just to avoid discomfort. And each small betrayal of yourself teaches the world exactly how to treat you. Because in a society obsessed with control and image, nothing is more dangerous than a person who respects themselves, a person who no longer needs applause. Self-respect isn't a luxury, it's a weapon. And in a world designed to keep you obedient, it might be the only weapon you've got. Friedrich Nietzsche saw it coming long before the world could name it. A slow erosion of the human spirit, not by war or disease, but by something quieter, far more insidious. The death of the individual, the withering of self-respect. He introduced a figure to stand against this decay, the Übermensch or Overman. Not a tyrant, not a ruler of others, but a master of himself. A person who does not beg for meaning or approval from the crowd, but forges his own values in the face of a meaningless, indifferent world. To Nietzsche, this wasn't just philosophy, it was survival, because modernity in his eyes was breeding a new kind of human, fragile, approval-starved, terrified of standing alone, a species addicted to applause and terrified of silence. Imagine a society where no one truly respects themselves, where behind every curated smile is quiet contempt, where every public virtue hides private self-loathing, where the currency of worth is measured not by truth or integrity, but by how convincingly you can mimic the opinions of the majority. It sounds dystopian, it sounds theatrical, but it's closer than you think. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche warns of the last man, a creature content with comfort, terrified of risk, unwilling to confront the emptiness of a life lived for others. He writes of a world where spiritual decay becomes normal, where people no longer seek greatness, but merely wish to avoid pain, discomfort, or exclusion. And it's in this decayed landscape that manipulation thrives. When you no longer respect yourself, you lose the will to resist. You trade freedom for convenience, principles for applause, and in doing so, you become the perfect subject for propaganda. It doesn't arrive in the form of marching armies or burning books. It comes softly, through advertising that tells you what you need to feel valuable, through trends that dictate what opinions you're allowed to hold, through invisible scripts that assign you a role in a play you didn't audition for. When a person with self-respect enters a room like this, it's disruptive. It's dangerous, because a man who answers only to himself cannot be easily managed. He cannot be bought with empty praise or silenced by public scorn. And systems of control, whether political, social, or cultural, are built on the assumption that you fear standing alone. The truth is, the first casualty in a controlled society is always the man who respects himself, because he's the one who reminds the others what they've lost. Human beings are wired to mirror each other, not just in language or habits, but in something far deeper, in how we perceive worth. Without realizing it, people around you are constantly reading signals, picking up subtle, invisible cues that tell them how to treat you. And here's the unsettling part. They'll believe about you what you believe about yourself. If you walk through the world with your head down, if your tone always hesitates, if you let people interrupt, overlook, or disregard you, they won't consciously think less of you. Their instincts will do it for them. Psychologists call it status signaling. It's built into human evolution. In tribal societies, deference to strength wasn't just about survival, it was about stability. The confident, decisive individual, the one who carried themselves like someone worthy of respect, naturally attracted influence. They didn't need to demand it. Their presence did the work. Modern studies on nonverbal dominance show this hasn't changed. Posture, eye contact, vocal tone, these aren't just meaningless gestures. They signal your internal hierarchy to the outside world, and people, without knowing why, respond to it. Now think about the moments in your life when you surrendered that power, when you laughed at jokes you hated just to avoid tension, when you let someone cut you off not because you agreed, but because it felt easier, when you held back your opinion in a conversation because you worried about being disliked. Each time you do this, something subtle happens. The people around you feel it. They may not name it, but instinctively they sense your self-betrayal. And the human brain, always assessing dominance and weakness in social groups, categorizes you accordingly. It's not cruelty, it's instinct. The harsh truth is that people trust strength, not desperation. They respect clarity, not appeasement. And the longer you carry yourself like someone willing to be overlooked, the more invisible you become. Respect isn't something you demand. It's something you magnetize by the standards you hold yourself to when no one's watching. And that's where the real danger lies. Because over time, the world begins to treat you exactly as you treat yourself. The small allowances, the quiet compromises, the unspoken tolerances, they stack up. Until one day, you realize people don't betray the strong, they abandon the weak. Not necessarily the physically weak, or the poor, or the marginalized, but the spiritually weak, the ones who gave away their authority one small decision at a time. And in a society designed to blur the line between confidence and arrogance, between self-respect and rebellion, it becomes easier than ever to shrink yourself for approval, and harder than ever to recognize what you've lost. The mind is a strange and fragile thing. It isn't merely a collection of thoughts or fleeting emotions, but a network of patterns, neurological pathways etched deeper with every experience, every belief, every decision you make about who you are and what you deserve. At the core of this network lies something psychologists call your self-schema. It's the invisible framework your brain builds to define you to yourself. It shapes not just how you see the world, but how you let the world see you. It dictates your limits, your expectations, and how much disrespect you're willing to endure before you even realize it's happening. And like all things in the mind, it's programmable. The more you accept being ignored, spoken over, doubted, or betrayed, the more your brain normalizes it. It stops registering disrespect as an anomaly. It starts labeling it as the natural state of your existence. Over time, your self-schema adjusts. You stop expecting to be valued. You stop believing your opinion matters. You stop imagining yourself as someone capable of commanding space in a world designed to suffocate those who hesitate. The Roman emperor philosopher Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." A truth that modern society quietly works to bury, because a person who respects themselves, not as a performance, but as a birthright, becomes difficult to control. They question authority. They refuse to buy what they don't need to impress people they don't admire. They disrupt groupthink. And most dangerously, they become unpredictable. This is why the modern world, with its infinite distractions, engineered insecurities, and weaponized approval systems, has learned to feed off the weak self-schema. The algorithm knows your fears. The ad knows your loneliness. The influencer knows your craving for significance. You are easier to sell to when you don't believe you are enough. Easier to manipulate when your worth depends on what others reflect back to you. Easier to silence when you no longer hear your own voice above the noise. It's a quiet, brilliant kind of control. A society that no longer needs chains because it has mirrors. And in those mirrors, it shows you a distorted version of yourself. One that's always lacking, always waiting for permission, always chasing the next validation hit disguised as progress. But the first rebellion doesn't happen on a battlefield or a ballot. It happens in the mind. In the small, unnoticed moments when you decide to respect yourself, when no one is watching, no one is applauding, and no one is offering a reward. That's where power is born. And that's the one thing those in control never want you to remember. There's a point in every life where the question isn't whether the world respects you, it's whether you do. And in that silent reckoning, something dangerous and beautiful can happen. The realization that while you can't control how others treat you, you hold absolute power over the standards you set for yourself. That is where self-respect is born and where true freedom begins. It starts small. Not in grand, defiant gestures or loud declarations, but in quiet decisions made in solitude. The moments you choose discipline over indulgence, principle over popularity, silence over needless approval, these are your sacred non-negotiables. The immovable boundaries you build not for show, but for survival. You become the architect of your own moral code, not the imitation ethics handed down by culture, social media, or influencers with a product to sell. Your code, the things you will and will not tolerate in your life regardless of the cost. Because without them, you're nothing but clay in the hands of a society eager to mold you into something profitable, predictable, and forgettable. Ask yourself, where have you let the world decide what you deserve? Where have you bent your spine to fit into spaces that shrink you? Which values have you quietly abandoned, traded away for compliments, promotions, followers, or fake friendships? If you can name them, you can reclaim them. Self-respect isn't arrogance. It isn't loud, it isn't hostile, and it doesn't require anyone else's validation. It's discipline. It's knowing you can walk away from things that insult your intelligence and spirit. It's setting boundaries not to keep others out, but to keep yourself intact. This is moral sovereignty, the power to live by your own laws in a world addicted to conformity. Not recklessly, not as a rebellion for its own sake, but as an act of psychological necessity. Because the modern world is a performance, and every day you're offered a role that demands you shrink, censor, and betray yourself. Refusing to audition is a radical act. And the truth is, the more you respect yourself, the less you'll find yourself needing to demand it from others. People instinctively recognize strength that requires no permission, and they adjust. Those who don't will fall away, revealing the ones who never belonged in your proximity to begin with. Every time you choose your principles over the path of least resistance, you cast a vote for the person you're becoming. Every small act of defiance against the culture of performance builds a kind of inner gravity, a force that no opinion, no algorithm, no temporary loss can shake. In the words Nietzsche might echo if he were here now, he who has mastered himself is unconquerable. And in a world built on illusions, the self-respecting man or woman is the rarest, most dangerous thing of all. The mirror is still there, it always was, but now it doesn't judge. It waits, not to shame you, not to flatter you, but to see who you've finally decided to become. Because here's a truth too few are ever taught. In the quiet, invisible language of human nature, people follow those who no longer ask for permission to exist. It isn't about the words you say, the clothes you wear, or the image you project. It's the invisible gravity you carry when your soul is no longer up for negotiation. When your decisions aren't shaped by the hope of applause or the fear of rejection. It's an energy so primal it predates language itself. The ancient instinct to follow certainty, to orbit around those who've declared silently and without hesitation, I belong to myself. And here's the terrifying beauty of it. The world belongs to those who stop waiting for it to hand them a place. The masses chase approval because they've been trained to believe it's the currency of value. But the few, the rare, understand that self-respect is its own economy. It's a law older than every culture, every empire, every social contract. Those who carry it magnetize loyalty, command space, and unsettle weak minds without raising their voice. Not because they demand it, but because it cannot be faked. People sense it. They move differently around it. So if you've been searching for some external sign, a signal to finally stand up straight in your own life, this is it. Not because these words are special, but because deep down, you already knew. This isn't a motivational slogan. It's a law. Until you respect yourself, nobody else ever will. If this made you reflect, hit like, drop a comment with "I choose myself," and subscribe for more content that doesn't ask for permission. Stay unshaken.